I don't give the same exercises to every single client. When I give them an exercise, they get the thing that addresses their need. And if you take a look at a lot of people around you in the gym, they're just blasting themselves with random exercises that don't make much sense. And so, in last week's article about unfucking your hips, uh, I'm going to show you the 4 screens that I use to determine what of those exercises you should be doing. And by the end of this, you'll be able to determine, okay, do I need all 4? Do I need 1? Do I need none? Welcome back this week. And like I mentioned, this week is going to be all about showing you what to do as far as it relates to which exercise of the 4 hip exercises that I showed you in the article, like show you which ones you actually need. And so a couple things that I want to explain as we go through these is what you're actually looking for. So you've come to me if you're one of my clients, you say, "Oh, my back's really bugging me, my knee's really bugging me, something's going on, I'm not sure what it is." And we get to a point that we determine that it's something related to the hips. Because a lot of times, if you have a knee that caves in, that means your glute is a little bit weaker, or you've got some stuff going on at the foot. If you've got a sore low back, could be from a multitude of things, but a lot of times it's from people spending way too much time sitting and then trying to do things that require them to move through their hips. And last time I checked, the hip, similar to the shoulder, is one of the most mobile joints in the body. But if it's restricted in any way, then that's going to lead you to a little bit of trouble. So, what we're looking for here is a functional deficit, if you will, right? It's either tight, which also means it's weak, or it's actually really restricted because you've got bone that blocks the movement, or some other connective tissues that are preventing you from getting into positions. Now, the thing that we can address are the weaknesses. And a lot of times, muscles that haven't been used before are weak and they present as tight. Your hamstrings, for example. We spend so much of our time in this seated position where our hamstrings are elongated, our hip flexors are shortened, and they just end up feeling stretched because they actually are biomechanically stretched the entire time, so that when you go to touch your hamstrings, they feel tight. Well, in reality, maybe it's because we've put our pelvis into a position for long periods of time that we've adapted to. And so essentially, the exercises will help you adapt back to a more neutral or normal position. Okay. So I'm going to take you through a couple of these screens and what they look like and what we're looking for. And then, maybe you go through them on your own to see how they actually feel. So the first exercise that we did this last week was the single leg kettlebell pass. So just a quick reminder, I've got a kettlebell in my hand, an imaginary one, and I hinge at the hip and I'm holding and I'm passing that kettlebell from hand to hand. Now, what that is doing is 2 very important things that relate to bigger lower body exercises. One, I'm seeing if I can maintain a balanced and neutral position here at the hip as I get into that hinge position. Okay, so if many folks who can't do a double leg hinge very well, more than likely, you're not even going to be able to get into the single leg hinge position. But a lot of times, what we see with this movement is that they get to the bottom and they start to open up. Their glutes actually take over for stability and open that hip up. Now, if they're stronger the other way relative to the muscles, the adductor pulls that pelvis around and down. And so if you've got weak glutes, you're going to be rotated with hip underneath. If you've got really strong glutes relative to your adductors, you're going to rotate and open because your body is looking for stability. Okay. The other thing to consider is, do I have the strength in my hamstring to hold in this more straight leg position and stabilize with the glute? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Okay, but this is what we're looking for. And the other piece that this tells me is, can I maintain my center of gravity by adding a moving component? That tells me if your proprioceptors are firing. If you're a runner, this is really important because you're constantly in a single leg stance. These are the things that I'm looking for. Okay, so if that's the case, then that single leg kettlebell pass might be the thing that you need. Now, the other one was that side plank Copenhagen. And what we targeted there was that inner thigh, or what I like to call the tenderloin, because that's just an overlooked muscle on just about anyone. I know every time that I go on vacation and come back and do a heavy squat pattern, my adductors are the muscles that feel it the most. So, for most people, we forget that we even have muscles on our inner thighs because we're looking for a stupid thigh gap. Forget about that for the moment. But what we want in that side plank Copenhagen, or that elevated side plank, is to test the endurance or the stamina of those muscles to create this closed leg position. Now, if that's too much, I'll show you a different exercise that you can use in place of it. But I mean, this is really one of the muscles that helps offset all that glute work that many of you are doing. Now, the other thing for the hip flexor, so that was the third exercise that we did, was that hip flexor draw-in, where we're down in the quadruped position or that plank position, and I'm actively pulling myself into a bent knee position with my foot on the roller or a bench. That is to strengthen the hip flexor. But in order to know if that hip flexor is tight and or weak, I have to do a screen, if you will. And all that screen is a modified Thomas test. I'll show you here when I lie back on the bench to go through these, right? But if that hip flexor doesn't allow my leg to fall flat or flush with the bench, then I probably need to work on either a hip flexor plank, so the draw-in without the dynamic movement, or just go right into that draw-in to start working on strengthening this hip flexor. Because again, if a muscle is short, it tends to become weak. And when it becomes weak, it tends to feel like it's tight, okay? And then the last one that we need to look at is a step down, because that's going to tell me how much control you have through that lateral hip and the glutes, because one of the things that the glutes does is control internal and external rotation of the leg. And so if we're doing a step down, so imagine I'm here and my knee wants to make out with my other knee, that means my glute is not able to control my femur to keep my knee tracking over my toe. So if I'm here doing that step down, this is good. But if I'm collapsing in, and see how I'm creating this C shape here with my knee and my torso, then I know I probably need to spend a little bit more time working that opening position of the hip to strengthen it, okay? So those are my 4 screens. So here's exactly what I would do to go through them. So the first one is that single leg stance or single leg RDL position. I'm gonna go hands on my hips, toe down and back, and just like the drinking bird, I'm coming down with my hip and back forward. Okay, if I'm pretty good at that, I'm going to get here, try to hold, and just see if I can hold it. If I'm able to manage that, then you probably don't need that kettlebell passing drill. But if you're a little bit wobbly and you're having trouble holding that position through the hip, then you're probably going to want to spend a little bit of time learning the hold and then learning the pass to maintain balance, right? It's just about creating stability. And you may notice over time that your hamstring starts to release a little bit because we're teaching it to be stable at these longer positions. Now the other one, that Copenhagen side plank hold, if you can't get into that Copenhagen position with your knee or foot up on the bench to put pressure through the abs or through the adductors, then you just flip on your side, go elbow on the bench, top foot goes down, and then you're just going to draw in this bottom leg. You're still going to be in that same position, stressing those same muscles, but that's going to tell me if you're able to hold the position, 1, through your core, but 2, through the adductor. Now, if you wanted to go into just a regular side plank, you totally could, but I'm still going to encourage you to take the support of that bottom leg out of the equation so that you can see, okay, I'm strong through my core, that's one, but am I strong enough through that adductor to prevent my hips from dropping to the floor? Okay. Now, this modified Thomas test is an interesting one because typically, if you went through a screen with your athletic trainer in college, it's one that you did as a stretch. And so, what this looks like is you're going to come up onto a bench or a table. You're going to pull both of your knees in, head goes back, and you're going to let one leg fall. Now, what we're looking for here is a straight leg, straight knee, or slightly bent knee, as long as this upper leg gets to at least the level of the table, if not a little lower. So what a weak hip flexor would look like is this dangle, right? I'm here. If my glutes are a little tight, it might also have me pulling out at an angle, right? So if we're in this still bent position, then we probably need to spend a little time building up the hip flexors, okay? And then the last one is the step down. And this is one you can do on a step in your living room or going upstairs. And really all I want you to do is go on one leg, take your heel and drop it to the floor in front of that step and come back up. What I'm looking for is the ability to control where the knee goes relative to my foot. And if I start collapsing in, then I know I've got a little bit of work to do on that lateral hip because it's got to be able to pull me back into this knee over toe position. Okay. So those are the 4 screens that I would use with my clients to determine which of the exercises to go through. Now, a couple things to keep in mind, right? So the screen for the RDL pass, that's going to tell you a lot about trunk stability relative to the hip and how that sits on the femur. If it feels like you need a little bit more stability as you get into this position, then yeah, you're going to need to build up to that single leg pass. The Copenhagen gives you a little bit more direct input into that adductor. But if your core is weak and you can't even hold a side plank, then there's not much that you're going to be able to do relative to the Copenhagen, and you might have to start a little bit further back. If you're finding that as you go through these progressions that they're all pretty dang hard, then you know that you can use all 4 of them. Now, I'm at a pretty good point where I don't use them to correct or strengthen things. I use them more as a primer for my bigger lifts. And I think that's part of the issue that folks run into is once they use a corrective exercise or an exercise that's supposed to fix something, if they keep doing it and it's not fixing anything, then why are you wasting your time doing it, right? If I'm going to give you an exercise, it's either going to be to bring up a weak area or to prime one of the bigger exercises. But if you're just doing it because this is what you've always done, then you're probably wasting a decent amount of time that you could be selecting an exercise that enhances what you're doing next. And a lot of times warm-ups fall into this, especially foam rolling, stretching. Like the thing that always blows my mind are the old guys at the gym who they come in and they stretch their hamstrings. So they do some of these, which I'm not sure they're even stretching hamstrings at that point. They do a couple of these. They hit a set of abs, a set of push-ups, a set of bench press, never touch the legs, even though they stretch their hamstrings, and then they go sit in the steam room and then they go home. That's what I want you to avoid, is that there is no rhyme or reason to what you're doing. So these 4 exercises that I've given you are the things that when used appropriately will make your hips feel a lot better. And so when you start to think about, all right, ooh, my back, ooh, my knee, ooh, my hip, go and determine, okay, where are you limited? So if I know that when I do a lateral lunge, I get this tight, stretchy sensation in my adductor, and it's not because I'm using a really heavy load, it's because I'm just here in body weight, then maybe getting into that Copenhagen position and learning to hold it and create tension at those longer lengths will help. If you find that when you are deadlifting that your hips just don't want to get back, then maybe you need to spend some time in that single leg position where you're creating stability around the hip joint. Because if you're getting into that deadlift position, whether you're pulling a kettlebell, a trap bar, or a barbell, and you start to turtle a little bit, right? Then that's telling me, I'm telling me as the coach, you are looking for room in your hip, can't find it, and so it comes from your low back. And that could be not just deadlifts, that could be squats, that could be any sort of pressing. And so if we're not able to get the hip to move appropriately in the socket, especially when we're running or jumping or trying to do things that are more than just sitting at our desk making day trades, then we know that we need to do a little bit of pre-training work so that we can perform at a high level without totally breaking ourselves down over time. Because the thing that ends up messing you up is not the load itself. It's the load that you're unprepared for in a position you don't have access to. And so in order to keep doing the things that you love, whether it's running marathons, playing pickup basketball, or any of that, you still want to do it and then get on with your day. So if you like this and you want more, go ahead and give me a follow.